We are live. It is 2:02 p.m. Central Standard Time in the United States, 8:02 p.m. BST in the UK. It's a Nomad Tech Project with Sam and Joe.
Hey.
Coming to you live on the 23rd of July, 2023. And if you're listening to the stream and watching and jumping in, which you're going to be a little early today because we're off an hour early, we have a very special guest. We have Steve Litchfield, who decided to spend some time with us today. And it's been I can't tell you how much I've been looking forward to this week. I've been a fan of your content for years with the old Windows Central stuff, and Windows podcast stuff, and all your stuff in PSC. Geez, I'm all off. I'm messed up, so I need to step back a little bit. I'm just excited, so I apologize. Steve, how are you, sir? Thank you for taking time to spend with us today. I know it's an honor and a privilege to have you on the show.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So, 8 p.m. in the UK, and it's time so that I won't run out of steam before the end of the show, hopefully.
Oh yeah, well, we'll try to keep it light on it. We don't want this to be anything other than a lightweight chat. So we appreciate, and like I said, we have no time or no problem adjusting our time slot to accommodate.
I prefer it myself.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, like I said, for Joe especially, because I know it starts to get, by the time we have a longer show, we're kind of pushing into the wee hours of a normal human being. And plus, it's a Sunday, and we realize that's a family day usually for a lot of folks. Yeah. So how are you? And how's the temperature in the UK? I know I've been hearing stuff in the European area where very high temperatures, like almost like unseasonably warm in the UK and stuff. Is it pretty warm there this week? Or
well, we're protected by the jet stream. Apparently, there's a jet stream of air flying across just below the UK and across northern France, which means that below northern France, everything's baking hot and 35, 40 degrees centigrade. In the UK, it's a very pleasant 20, and we're wondering what all the fuss is about. So it's
right.
Yeah, nice and perfect.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't pay much attention because it's the middle of summer, and where I live in the Midwest, it's generally very humid and very hot in the summer, so we're kind of used to it. So, and also we have air conditioning in most of our homes. I didn't know that in the UK and a lot of Europe that's kind of not a thing. So,
it is in the car, yeah, just not in our homes,
right? Which is interesting. So. Anyway, so where exactly do you live in the UK? I know where Joe's at because I've loved this interaction I've had with Joe because I've learned a lot of things about the UK, about regional differences and descriptions and accents. And so where exactly are you in the UK, and have you lived there your whole life? Like you moved around, like where are you at now as opposed to where you were when you were a child or something like that?
Yeah, I live in Reading, which is right in the, I would say the centre of the UK. In fact, Birmingham is probably the centre, but so I'm a bit south of that. I'm about 50, 60 miles southwest of Joe. Easy access to London, easy access to everything really, but right in the middle, so nowhere near the sea, which is unfortunate because I love the sea and I love water. I was brought up in the west of England, southwest of England, a place near Taunton in Somerset, which no one will have heard of, but there we are. So I'm a West Country boy. But I've been in near Reading and Berkshire and sort of in the middle of the south of England for the last 35, 40 years. So there's no real accent to speak of. I should speak sound the same as Joe, hopefully.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much. You articulate yourself a bit better though.
Right. So yeah, that's interesting. Like, and again, I always heard the differences, but then we've had other guests on and they live in other areas, especially they start getting in the northern areas, how, and then watching, unfortunately, I have to kind of make myself that typical American. I did watch Ted Lasso and I did get a lot of kick out of it. And kind of listening to all the other accents, like the Jamie Tart character, how he would say "pay," right? And just the kind of different, those little kind of nuances that, and I try not to be that typical kind of dopey guy that I know in the United States, it's regional differences, but if you don't hear the accents very often, you don't really pick up on them until you really start to really pay attention and have exposure to people. Then you can kind of go, oh, that's interesting how they say that a little different. And then words, the meaning of words, like a barn, right? And how they, if you go to the next county and you describe and they're like, what you on about? Like, what are you talking about? It's like how it's such a small area, then how could they be a totally different word? Like you didn't have any reason to know what that other word referred to. It's like you might as well use something and that an American would say something like it. What are you trying to get on about? It's interesting how there's that. It's just interesting to me. I find it fascinating.
Yeah. So my accent is entirely.
Yeah. Yeah, and so when you listen to Americans, are you able to pick up on that as much as when you've had I know you've had a lot of guests on your show and a lot of people from all over the world. Are you able to pick up on without them telling you where they are regionally, are you able to kind of discern a little bit, or is that something that's kind of a little difficult?
Yeah, I can distinguish between about 3 or 4 different American dialects, as it were. New York, Texas, maybe the southern, southeast, sort of Florida, that area, and then sort of West Coast is more generic, which is kind of I'm guessing where you are, but yeah, that's as fine as it gets for me.
Yeah, same. Needs to be quite
Yeah,
strong
no,
for me
I'm
to
actually
notice.
almost smack dab in the middle of the country. Yeah, I'm actually in St. Louis, so that is probably not a city that maybe a lot of people from. Actually, you just had our baseball teams at London Stadium a couple of weeks ago playing baseball. The Chicago Cubs and the St. Louis Cardinals came in town, so that's. We didn't talk about that with Ted because apparently he's not a big fan of sport. So we kind of just
No,
I'm
yeah.
just not I'm not interested in that kind of stuff. So if you don't talk sport, it's okay, which is interesting. Are you a big fan of sport? Like, is it just football or maybe cricket or other kinds of things? What's your background in like the sports and interest or love?
I take an interest in any sport played at the highest level. So I watch the World Cup in football and some of the internationals. I follow the England, Australia cricket, for example, and I've been following the Formula One motor racing. But I'm not a dyed in the world. I've got to have sports in my life 24 hours a day. But I pay attention and I try and know the names and the teams and take an interest in what other people are talking about. But not American sports.
Right. Do you participate in live events? Do you like to go to like cricket matches or the football matches, or is that live participation? Is that something you do very often or not particularly?
I used to quite a bit. Yeah, I used to watch cricket and various other sports when I was young, but then I got married and had a family and et cetera, et cetera. And these things just fall off the end in terms of priority. It's fine. And these days, there's so many cameras at so many events. You can just watch anything you want from any angle. So it's not quite as essential to get there. But yeah, I used to go to live events.
Oh, okay. Good deal. So I guess now we can just talk about so your background and how did you get started? I know you've had a long career and you've been, like I said, I've picked you up years ago when I was just getting into the mobile space and got my first Windows phone and was doing some searches and stumbled upon you and Race podcast and was like, this is just fantastic. Just great, following and watching at the same time enjoying the content, kind of watching the decline of Windows Phone and kind of knowing that the door was closing and you can kind of feel, unfortunately, staying on to the last moment, watching the ship go down, taking your beloved Lumia with it. So what is your background? And then how did you get started? And was it more journalism or was it more just doing, how did you get into this whole tech space and talking about tech and mobile and stuff like that?
It all started probably when I left university. I was studying physics and I got into computers because computers were used a lot in physics back in the day. This was in 1990 or so. And I had to go off away. I then got married and we went away on holiday. And part of the holiday, I wanted to just do a bit of programming and tinkering with technology. And Psion, PSION, I'm sure you've heard of them, but did palm top computers and with QWERTY keyboards. And they've got a built-in programming language. So I went away and wrote a few games while I was away, came back and Psion got in touch and said, we quite like this game. You've issued a shareware. Can we include a full version of it on our official commercial games pack? And that started about 5 or 6 or 7 years working with Psion and distributing shareware, writing software for Psion, supporting people, writing articles for a magazine, a paper magazine, shock horror, paper, Palm Top magazine in the UK it was called. And it ran from about 1993 to about 2001 or so. And then from there, the internet age happened, and websites, and eventually my phone show videos. They started in 2006. I started doing them before YouTube even existed, really.
Wow.
So I put up my videos as QuickTime MOV files that people could download onto their computer and play in a tiny thumbnail-sized player on their PC. So it was primitive days, and when YouTube came along, it was a big boon. And the phone show sort of ran from 2006 until the current day, which is what, 17 years. But I started to say 1993 was the start of Psion, and then around 2003 was when sort of Symbian came along and the big Nokia smartphones and that era. And then 10 years on from that, of course, to 2013 is when you had things like the Lumia 1020, classic Windows phone. So, and my career has really gone in decades. And now 10 years beyond that, we got to 2023, and I can look back on most of it. So I'm still tinkering away, but my career kind of gets divided into those eras.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's fascinating. When Joe was talking, or we had Ted on, he was, I hadn't even thought that it's been like all those years. I knew it wasn't a recent project, but when he said it was like since 2006, I'm like, God, that's a long It's a long time, and it's all the shows. I mean, I think are you nearing 800? I thought we were in the mid sevens as far as the phone show chat. I know.
Yeah, the audio podcast is 759 as I record this. So we're aiming to get to 1,000, which will be approximately 15 to 20 years, something in that region. I think that's long enough for a single podcast. And I think at 1,000, we just hang up our hats and ride off into the sunset. But yeah, 759, the phone show chat, the audio podcast that you presumably know fairly well, started about 2008. Ted, I'm sure he told you a version of the story, but he suggested I should do a podcast, an audio podcast, to accompany my videos. And I said, I don't think there's enough to talk about, Ted. We'll have a trial one, and I wasn't terribly keen. I thought, how on earth are we going to talk for an hour ever in a single show?
Right.
And here we are, 759 shows later, each of them over an hour, and somehow we've still got masses to talk about. So I guess the technology world just keeps moving on and staying interesting.
Absolutely.
I enjoy them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I can tell you that when we have our discussions, and we don't always talk about tech, and sometimes we do, it just depends on the show and the guests we have on. And then sometimes it's just Joe and I. I am amazed at just looking at I can see the live counter and looking up, and it's like 34 minutes and then 48 minutes. I'm like, it feels like I haven't really, I mean, it's just, I can't, the time just gets away from me so much. It's insane how just having an in-depth conversation back and forth about a specific device or technology or even something that, especially if it's a controversial take, not a negative controversy, but people have differing opinions on the approaches, how quickly 20 minutes can just evaporate. And you're like, wow.
Although you're not allowed to have a different opinion on Twitter.
Well,
it's a bit nasty on
there. Well, and it's I guess it's just social media in general. But like I said, I mean, we're at the end of the day, I thought we're all here to enjoy tech and talk about it and be enthusiasts. And you have to understand, with all the different tech, there are different approaches, different workloads, different workflows, different exposures. I mean, Steve's coming at it from a programming perspective and having decades of experience, and then you got younger people who they've only known the smartphone, right? They don't have any other, they don't remember a time when there was Symbian and Palm OS and Linux, Unix-based systems, right? They just think, oh yeah, everything's Fortnite and, Snapchat and S23, right? They live in that, or the iPhone, as apparently is young.
And yet, because of yourself and myself, we're of a similar age, I think. We remember life before the internet. We remember roughly how computers work, how to connect them up, which means, although things mostly work in 2023, I still, to this day, I'm sorting out basic connection problems and technical problems in my family and extended family when youngsters who just assume that everything's always going to work, and they've no idea what to do when it breaks. And so, but knowing a time that the internet didn't exist and you had to do everything manually means we've got a good way of breaking down logically where something's gone wrong and to fix it. And I find that keeps me in good stead.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially with just in another allegory to that would be, cars now, back. So when I was younger, you had people who could rebuild a transmission, right? Most people knew how to drive a standard transmission vehicle, right? Very few cars had automatics, and there were people that literally would rebuild them. Like now in the United States, you can't find a place that rebuilds a transmission. If it goes, you just have to, it's turning into any other consumer good, right? You just replace it, right? If you have a faulty transmission, you just get a new one. If you have a new stove or a new microwave, who has a TV repair shop? When I was a kid, Steve was a kid growing up, you lugged your big old TV in if you could carry it. And if you had a console TV, which we did, it was weighed 580 pounds, right? And it was big, this wood monstrosity. And a gentleman would come to your house with a toolbox, and he would open up the back panel with screws. It had that kind of, I don't know what it was. It was kind of like balsa wood, but it was kind of flimsy, and it would take off the back, and you had vacuum tubes, and he would replace stuff and wiring. And it was like, or with my dad would just kick the side of the console TV with his foot and, make it work. Rabbit ears, right? It's just, like in a perfect point, Steve, how it's like, it's the troubleshooting and what's the problem? And then working back through analytical steps. Okay. Is it powered on? Do you have a connection? Is that connected? Those logical steps of troubleshooting that people just don't seem to have to do now because it's a different world they exist in. So
my favorite thing is that a youngster comes to me and says, TikTok's not working or some modern service or application. And the very first thing I do is go to the web browser, and they say, well, why are you doing that? I say, I want to establish I've got a basic connection before I troubleshoot your application that sits on top of the connection. And just basic things like that, and breaking it down to where am I first going to see the bandwidth stop, And for me, that's just to go to a very simple web page in the web browser. And if that works and the connection's solid, and then you work on from there. It's good fun. And I've got a whole network.
Right, absolutely. Or you could really blow their mind and open up a command prompt and go to the command line and actually do a telnet. So let's see if I can hit this. Like, what are you doing? It's like, I can telnet the IP through a port and see if the connection's there. And they're like, what? It's like, never mind. It's okay. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I've got a whole network actually of elderly people. I mean, I started supporting a few family members, and they recommended to their friends, and they recommended to their friends. And it's usually 60, 70, 80-year-olds. I shouldn't say 60-year-olds, I'm 60. 70 and 80-year-olds who have problems with their computers. And I go around and I hold their hand and I sort out the virus or fix their web browser and update their computer or that sort of thing, which I quite enjoy, and that's quite relaxing. It brings in a bit of beer money. So I do that on the side.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I get that too, but I get the situation. I don't know, maybe as a person who's the resident troubleshooter in the family, where my spouse will be working on something and she'll like, hey, come in here, because we work from home. She'll be in the office of the bedroom next to me. I'll come in there and I go, okay, well, what do you got? And I said, okay, well, show me what's failing. Show me what's the problem. And she goes, well, it's working now. I swear to God, it wasn't working for 20 minutes. I go, I just walked in and now it's working. It's hilarious how I can she goes, you just walk in the room. Yeah. It's just karma. So getting
Sam,
on to
just quickly, the levels I deal with at work though, I have people come in and go, I've got no network. You check their phone. You've got airplane mode on, sir. Right. It's like, that's the level people are at.
Yeah. Did you turn it off? Did you turn it on again? Okay. Yeah.
See this little airplane symbol? That's airplane mode. It's so embarrassing.
I got virtually fired from an aerospace company once when they had a new manager came in, and he was a real, fairly nasty and terse with me anyway. And one day he called me, and I was the kind of IT support guy in the office. And he said, Steve, my computer's not working. Fix it. It's your problem. Your IT. I looked at it. I looked on the floor. I said, in front of the whole office, well, you could try plugging it in. And I went over, pushed the power plug into the wall, and it started working. And he gave me such a dirty look, and he never talked to me again. And I was unceremoniously semi-retired or stroke fired about a year later. But it was worth it for that one moment of glory.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because especially when you have that moment where you realize what it is, and you don't want to respond for the first couple of seconds just because you want to I just want to be happy in this moment. I just want to enjoy this because I'm going to launch.
Everyone in that room knew. Everyone in that.
I'm not going to launch this guy, but it's going to be in front of an audience, right? Yeah. I'm going to basically, and I know it's going to be definitely my career, but boy, for that 10 seconds, you're like,
if he'd been a nicer person, I would have done it more gently and more privately. But because he was such a rat bag, I thought, I'm just going to make this public and let everyone know.
Hey, you know what? Hey,
well deserved.
That energy. Yep. You know what? I'm okay with that. That's actually so kind of switching gears to so currently, I know you test a lot of phones and do tons of reviews and that kind of thing. So and are you finding that the pace because it seems like with the way phones come out now, they kind of seem to be like a cycle where you have the releases and how they come out. How do you manage that? Have you kind of gotten a good feel for how to make your work happen, like what phones to do, how to do your workload? Because I know it can be kind of tricky doing reviews and trying to make sure you have good content and reviews that are from actual experience, not just something you did for 72 hours just to throw it up on a website. How do you manage that?
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot over the years. When I started, I was literally the only person in the entire world doing videos on phones, reviewing it. I was in the world. And of course, there's so much competition over the last 20 years. And now a new Pixel comes out, a new iPhone, a new Samsung, and you've got 50 video reviews on day one for all people who've been given the pre-release units. And so everything in between. So now I have to pick the ones I really want to review, the ones I'm most interested in, the ones that actually fire me up. So this is a device I want to physically use, and because of that, I want to get the most out of it and find every nook and cranny. It's like the Xperia, for example. I know you've got there, Joe, as well. The Xperia 1 Mark V, a cracking phone. And I just want to use this, and I want to use it for everything, and the imaging, the media. I love it to bits, and because of that, the enthusiasm does show out. Hopefully in the content. In terms of all the other phones, there are so many Chinese phones now coming out, maybe not in the USA, but in Europe. We're getting like a phone launch every day, literally every day in the news. There is a new Android phone. makes me kind of glad that I am at the moment. The last 3 or 4 years, I've been using an iPhone as my main phone, but at least this gives me an opportunity not to keep being tempted to dip into my wallet, because it's only once a year that I have to make that decision. Do I buy the new iPhone or don't I? And if I don't,
it's a very Google-fied iPhone, though, I must say.
Yeah, and Microsoft, but there we are.
Yeah.
But yes, over the years, then all the different phones. When it started, it was just the new Nokias, for example, the new Nokia N series, and then we got things like the 808, which I've also got here, Nokia 808. And they were coming out infrequently enough, sort of every 2 or 3 months, that you could spend quite seriously a couple of months with a phone and get every last detail out of it before the next one came along. The Lumia 1020 1 year later, for example, which is the absolute classic Windows phone I'm showing on camera. So then you could really plan your content. A phone would come out and you'd write down, these are the 10 review areas, and you'd literally write 2,000 words on each area of the phone in gory detail, because you had the time to do it before the next one came along. And then over the years, it's got the pace of Android phones in particular has just got so insane that you cannot keep up with everything. You've just got to pick your battles. And in a year and a half ago, when my dad sadly died end of 2021, and I always said sorting out his estate would take months of my life, and it did. And so, and if you take months out of the tech world, you fall so far behind. So I thought the only way I can make this work is to, quote, retire. In practice, I haven't fully retired. I still write the odd article. I still do videos. I'm trying out YouTube Shorts at the moment. Maybe you can.
They're fantastic, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the shorts. I do like them because it's just a nice little. It's very. I'm a big fan of the shorts. I think, and especially for what you're doing and the way you approach it, I've been a big fan. I think it's. Fantastic.
I miss your longer form videos, but your shorts are very, very good. You fit a lot in them.
It's like the early days of YouTube. I felt I was a pioneer, which I was, and now with the YouTube Shorts, which are still very new, and in terms of people in the tech world embracing them, what people normally do, I've observed, is they do a long form video, and then they either do a companion short summarizing it, or they splice, a particular section of their longer video in shorts form. Whereas I'm purposefully saying, well, I want to cover, say, the Xperia is a good example. Came out, I've got it about 2 weeks ago, and I've already done about 5 or 6 different videos on different aspects of it. With each short, 58 seconds worth, specific, 58 seconds covering a specific aspect. And if you follow me on YouTube, they'll just get that thrown into their normal shorts feed, or you can watch them one at a time if you swipe within my channel. But I'm experimenting, and YouTube are always changing the codecs and the compression, and they're tweaking the interface themselves. So things are changing, and I feel like I'm in at the start of something new, which is exciting, even if it's not ideal. So for Joe, you want the 7-10-minute videos, and I enjoy doing them, but A, they take forever, and B, I can't get up to the production values of MKBHD and Mr. Mobile and all the rest. And C, just the sheer time, really. And the fun factor, as I say, I feel like I'm experimenting and innovating again, and it's fun to try it. If it doesn't work, and if I get fed up with shorts, I may well go back to a different form. But
it's fine, Steve. I just watched 7 shorts in a row. I get the long form then.
Well, and what I like about it is because you said, remember when you're writing your regular reviews, you would have 2,000 words for each kind of section of this, which is not nice. I know it's maybe 2,000 words is going to be hard to get in maybe a minute, but you can kind of sectionalize that. It kind of gives you kind of like, okay, this short's going to be about the camera. This is going to be up the UI. This is going to be, you can kind of break that down and kind of still get that same energy and that same kind of workflow like you used to have to do. And I like them too, because although I have to say that depending on who it is, I will watch Flossie Carter. He'll have an hour long, because I can watch that and I have no problem going through 60 minutes of it. And because it's more of the entertainment, it talks about the phone and the way it is. And, but yeah, to your point, that wasn't a thing, but now, like I said, I don't even have to know when a phone event happens now, because immediately my phone will just explode with Twitter messages and YouTube this and Mr. Who's the Boss. I'm just like, oh, it's almost, I'm glad that it exists, because as a tech enthusiast, I like it, but it can be overwhelming sometimes. It's almost to the point of being like, geez, okay. So you don't even have to pay attention to it. It just kind of gets delivered to you on a platter, and it's really overwhelming at times.
Yeah, which is partly why it was a sigh of relief actually moving to iPhone as my main SIM, because That way, it's a once a year thing, as I say, and there's less changing throughout the year. And the Android thing is then a fun thing for me. I don't have to, nobody's paying me to stay on the cutting edge, and I don't have to live and die by the latest changes to Android and the firmwares and the ROMs and the updates. I could just treat them as and when I feel like working, as and when I feel like playing with it. I can do it without having to think this is my blood money. This is my life and blood. I've got to manage everything. Back in the day, 2009, 2010, I had feed readers, Google Reader back in the day, and all the various feeds. And the moment anything happened or I discovered something, I would write about it and be the person to break a story. And it was I was being paid by websites at the time to break this news and to write about things that were happening. Now I'm not being paid to write for a website anymore. I don't feel like I have to produce X number of words the moment anything happens. The time critical nature of it has kind of gone away, and I can relax and think, okay, well, other people have broken the news or this new device is out. I can stop and think about what I think about it, find an interesting angle, and then do a video or an article about it without having to think, oh my goodness, I've got to publish in the next 5 minutes. Back in the day when I was covering keynotes, for example, or a device launch, they'll be happening on one monitor, and then on the other laptop I'd be writing my article, and I think Rafe wants me to publish this as soon as possible, so I hit publish, and then after the article is published, the event's still going on, and I'm going back editing the article, and the article is growing in real time. So as people refresh or come to it, they're getting the very latest information. And in some cases, that can be very, very stressful. 2 or 3 hours of just absolute non-stop concentration, typing and trying to do 2 things at once. But thankfully, my life is a bit more relaxed now.
Yeah, and like I said, and then you'll see that in regular articles. They'll have like at the top of the article say update timestamp. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah. So I can imagine. As you've gone through all that, it's a lot to manage, especially and really if you're multitasking. And I still make this argument to my boss at work all the time because I'm in that kind of software development, production support kind of thing, and trying to like bounce. I'm trying to work on something, and it's like, hey, did you know the server went down? Yeah. Okay, hold on a minute, but I got to finish this. Okay, well, wait a second. It's going to be down. It's not going to come back up. Just give it a second. Let me get through this like 2 minutes because I don't think it can be really effective with going on with 3 and 4 different channels of thought at the same time. You're going to basically miss something. And in our world, if you miss something and you're not paying attention, you don't see a node's down or something, and then it's like you're making it worse, and you got people going, hey, let's get this online, right? And you're like, yeah, but I got to pay attention to it to do that diagnostic, the stuff that we have to check to see. So I don't
think men are as good as multitasking as women. My wife is always reminding me of that women can. I cannot write, for example, if I've got the spoken word radio on, I cannot listen to the words coming into my ear and compose and think at the same time. And my least favorite along those lines, I go to fix, say, a customer's computer, and she's a little old lady, 70-year-old lady. And as I'm trying to do something really complicated in the Windows registry and try and get her computer up and running, she's jabbering on it to me about a baby, and she's really enjoying the social aspect of my visit to fix her computer. But I cannot do this and listen to you at the same time. I'm just not wired that way. That's general to men.
I'm the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of funny. And my wife will tell you that she's great at that kind of thing. And I'm okay with splitting these things off. What can't you? It's like, well, I don't. Maybe I'm just. That's why I decided.
You chaps able to listen to a podcast and read an article at the same time?
I can't do that. No,
I can't do it either. No. When I see people doing it.
I think they're looking like they're doing it, but how much are they really understanding, retaining, and really engaging?
True.
Yeah. So when I write, I generally have instrumental music on it. I don't even have songs with words, so that I literally, the only words in my brain are the ones I'm thinking of and putting down on the page. I can't have someone jabbering and singing in my ear.
I was going to ask, as far as your music, I know you have instrumentals, and I'm assuming classical music, but do you listen to other kinds of for instance, I'm kind of a big fan of kind of like rock groups, like something like Polyphia, stuff like that play kind of like just. I think Tim, he's incredible. I've never seen a guitarist be able to play and do some of the chords that he can do. So is it just any instrumental music, like just classical, or other kinds of music like taste? Are you pretty eclectic musically as far as what you're interested in?
I'm interested personally in all forms of music, every genre, every artist, every era, including classical. But for writing, I generally go with electronica. So Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, Tim Blake, and early Pink Floyd. Things which just drones and you have rhythms and sequencers, but and things to keep your brain going and your motivation up, but nothing that will distract from what I'm trying to create.
Right.
And then if I'm out walking, for instance, walking with the dog, then of course you put on the rock music and you want the vocals and you want the lyrics and you want the emotion. But yeah, when I'm writing, it's Tangerine Dream's my go-to, and luckily they've got about 500 albums to choose from. So
wow, it's going to take a while for you to get through all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess you have your probably go-to favorites. I'm assuming that you like to enjoy. Yeah. So, I guess my question is foldables. Like, I know you've been a huge fan of the Duo. I love them. I mean, now we've got the Pixel Fold, and yet we have all of us have our own Duos. It's great.
Yeah,
Joe.
yeah.
And Joe,
yay,
but if you notice that I'm the only one who is rocking his Extreme Skins.
Yep, I need to get one. Yeah.
Right. I have to, because actually I cracked the back, and I didn't even notice it until a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, well, who cares? Just throw a skin on it, and that's what you can do. Extremeskins.co.uk. Check them out. It's a sponsor of the show. I know, Steve, I know you've purchased some of them. I like their quality. I think they're really responsive. They're pretty good. And if you misapply it, they'll kind of give you a little bit of the business. I kind of like that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I had an Extreme Skin, of course, on my Duo 2 before I sold that. Maybe in hindsight, I shouldn't have sold that because I'm now kind of missing it. But the original Duo has some advantages over the Duo 2.
Yeah.
Not least the fact that it's lighter and thinner. So I'm kind of living with this at the moment and wondering whether I should rebuy Duo 2. I've had skins on various other phones, though, including the Sonys and various Samsungs. But the Duo is the one that's most obviously crying out for skins, because you can apply them to front and back and get the grip and protection. And the device itself is protecting its own screen. The screens are inside, unlike current foldables where you've got screens inside and out, and they're all rather fragile.
Yeah, and I guess how do you feel about Duo 3? Because my speculation is I think Microsoft, I would think they would like to do it, but I don't think they're going to do it. I just think that project's going to go. I think it's going to get canceled. I just got a bad feeling about it.
Yeah, I think they pulled so many people off the Duo teams. They've still people working on Duos on updates, and that's good. That the Duo we've just been showing on camera and the Duo 2 are still getting monthly updates, and still I think the Duo 2 will get some feature updates. It's not totally dead, but in terms of designing a new phone, the dual Gorilla Glass foldable 360-degree hinge, I think that's gone. I think Microsoft have got a terrible history at sticking with an idea. They try things and then they pull the plug, and they don't market. The Duo 2 over here and the Duo before it, they were not marketed at all. You wouldn't see an advert anywhere. There was zero marketing dollars put behind it. And if people don't know such a great product exists, they can't possibly buy it. And then Microsoft turn around and say, well, it didn't sell very well. And of course it didn't sell, but no one knew it existed.
Right. You gotta tell people they hear it. You can't just use word of mouth. Now you can with the iPhone or whatever. And I even make the argument with Apple. They could just get rid of their entire marketing division altogether, because it's so steamrolled now that when the iPhone's coming out, everybody's going to get one. People are going to talk about it, and you can even let the tech media do it. If I were Apple, I would just say, "Hey, folks, you know what? It's Apple time. It's iPhone time. Just go get them. You'll know where to go." Right, and just rinse and repeat. I don't even think they have to ever put an advert ever again for an iPhone. I think it's kind of self-sustaining, which is pretty remarkable what Apple has been able to do.
This was Google's issue, wasn't it?
I do like the fact that then finally they decided, hey, maybe we should tell people about these Pixels, right? They had the Pixel 3, the 3A, and the 4, and the XL, right? And they're just like, hey, maybe we should have an advert, maybe a print ad, maybe something on a commercial, maybe put it through a sport event like the Super Bowl and stuff, and let people know that True Tone and Magic Eraser and we have Pixels. I mean, finally, and their sales are increasing. How would you know it, Steve? Because people know they exist, and there's another phone. I guarantee there are people that didn't know that Google made a phone. I guarantee you people didn't know.
Yeah, and the Duo 3, and I think anybody who's got any sense at Microsoft, given that the Duo is sadly being cancelled, the proper Duo concept, I think they're going to say, well, do we go ahead with Duo 3? And then someone will brandish their Pixel Fold and say, look, I've loaded up our Microsoft Office and Microsoft apps on this Pixel Fold. This is exactly what we want to produce. And they say, well, why don't we just preload our Microsoft stuff and call it a Duo 3? And that's exactly what we've been hearing rumored, that it'll be same form factor as the Pixel Fold, but with the Microsoft apps. Whether they actually launch it as a product as such, or whether they just say, look, buy the Fold, here are the apps, this is the way to tie it into your Microsoft company and your Microsoft services. I think that's what Duo 3 will end up being, even if not actually called the Duo 3.
Right. And how do you feel it and I always tell people that I think Do you feel foldables, and it will include flippables, right? We'll include the flips and stuff like the Razor Plus and the Razor, the older Razors. Do you think that they are a niche thing? Do you think that do they have a chance of becoming something that people may use as another form factor? That you will see a lot of people engaging with, maybe not having their Pixel, but maybe having, if they ever have a Pixel Flip, which I don't know if they will. How do you see the foldable shake out if you could reach into your crystal ball? You've had a lot of years of prognosticating, I'm sure. What do you think the next 3 to 5 years for foldables or flippables looks like at its current pace?
I think certainly, well, obviously it's just Android only. I'm not sure Apple will ever do a foldable. So let's leave Apple out of it. And of course, iPhone is a huge 30, 40, 50% of the market. But in the Android world, I think flippables will reach 10 or 20%, and foldables perhaps 2 or 3%. They are quite niche. But the Flip series, the Galaxy from Samsung, and now we've got one from Motorola as well, and I think Honor are doing one as well. So there are some flips out there which are actually pretty decent, and they do let, especially ladies, without being sexist, but they can slip them into a small purse or handbag because they're not long monoblocks. So that is a positive thing. So I think there is a market, and they are getting more durable. We've seen the recent Samsungs after 4 years of trying. They're now, you can not jump up and down on them, but you don't have to mollycoddle them. You can just use them as a normal phone, unfold them, fold them, and use them, and they won't break on you. Whereas I think some of the Pixel Fold owners, Generation 1 from Google, they have found there have been some failures, and I'm sure Google will get better at that. So I think the market's very young, and there is a market there. It's 10, 15% combining flips and folds. But again, only in the Android world. I'm not sure Apple will ever go down the route of an iPhone Fold.
And to extension of that, my question is probably my parents' phones. My parents' phone's ringing. I'm at their house. So I apologize. So, but like, do you think of, they have, and it even talks to them. It's the old school, like caller ID where it actually talks to them. It's actually pretty awesome. Anyway, where do you think, why Apple wouldn't approach that? Like, what are your thoughts on, they don't need to, it's why bother? Like what I know you said that Apple doesn't, and I would probably agree, but what do you think the reasoning for the reason why Apple and Cupertino isn't going to get into that space? Do you have thoughts about that?
Well, Apple, I mean, people at the moment, you take a folding phone like the Galaxy Z Fold or Z Fold, as you call it, and the idea is it's a phone that you can unfold and it become a tablet, and you can use it as a mini laptop, and it's all very clever. But if you're someone in the iPhone world, you've already got your iPhone of the size you prefer. You've also got your iPad Mini, which is not that much bigger than a folder, and you've got full-size iPads. You've got the iPad Pros, you've got your MacBooks, and goodness, there are so many screens already. The need for a phone which actually becomes an iPad Mini, when you can actually have an iPad Mini, and you have so many compromises in having a folding form factor. Yes, it's nice to have the one device in two, but the iPhones, I mean, they're legendarily robust now. And the Pro I've got here, the 14 Pro Max, stainless steel chassis, and it's ceramic shield glass, and it's with a case on as well, and the IP68 30 meters for 30 minutes or whatever it is. It's ridiculously robust. To sacrifice almost all of that just to have a phone which unfolds to become an iPad Mini, when you can just buy an iPad Mini as well, and everything syncs beautifully, and all the services and everything just hands off, and you can use them in one continuous flow. I don't think that's a compromise that Apple will ever make. It's nice. Geeks love folding phones, and I love playing with folding phones. I just wouldn't necessarily want to pay £2,000 to $2,000 because of the worries.
So I see value in having two separate screens. I actually prefer this to a foldable myself.
You mean the Duo? Yeah, absolutely. I'm so cross that Microsoft they abandoned Windows Phone legendarily. That Microsoft by Nokia and the whole platform dissolved, and that was a crying shame. And then they introduced this, and we were like, yes, go Microsoft, and they abandoned it, and they're forever doing that. Google are also forever abandoning things.
Very much so.
It's not just Microsoft here, and it's not just Nokia. It's just the things change in the tech world, which is why when I was out for 6 months sorting out my dad's affairs, you get even 6 months out of the business, you kind of get quite a long way behind. Then you're forever playing catch up. But things change in the tech world.
And I agree with that assessment too. And now when you think about it, it's like, also remember, if they do have a foldable phone and people they're not going to go around, you're not going to steal, you're not going to cannibalize anybody else's sales. You're going to basically stop them from buying an iPad. So basically, if you sell a foldable, you just gave yourself, instead of buying two devices, now you've basically cannibalized your own chance of selling an iPad to that new customer. And agreed that the iPad, whatever mini, would be a better experience than any iPhone folding device would be, right? So it's and again, people on the Apple side, they don't seem to be clamoring for it. I don't hear people talking like, and when the funny thing is, I don't know, I'm sure you've experienced this using your Duo in public. Like I will use it, and people just look at me like, what is that? Like they think I'm from like 31, 33, right? And say, what planet are you from? They're like, I said, oh, this is. Well, then you tell them it's Microsoft. They think you tell them it's an Android device. Like, oh, that's interesting. Well, is it one of those Samsung things, right? They say it's Samsung thing. I go, no, it's actually made by Microsoft. They're just like, what? Microsoft makes phones? I went, and it's funny. It's to the point of my wife hates when I have the Duo in public. She can't stand it because she goes everywhere we go. We were talking about getting an RV, or as they call them in the UK, a caravan. Right? I was going to get a caravan. So a motorhome, right? So I've seen her using and the funny thing is I was actually researching on two screens. I had a website pulled up and I was talking to the gentleman. I was looking at something else. I actually was tracking a baseball score, and I was looking at other competitors, see the price, right? And I noticed he's not even listening to me. He's just looking at my Duo. He's just staring at that. And I go, what's wrong? He's like, I'm just watching you use this, whatever the hell you're using. What is that? And I showed him what I was doing. He's like, that is just amazing. Like I have an iPhone. I've never seen anything even like that. So it's funny how it's just using it. And then when you show people, hey, it's two different screens and you can do this and at the same time, and you could fold, then you do this kind of thing and you go like this, watch this. And they're like, wow. And you could tent it up and watch a video. Like you don't have to hold it. Like I'll sit at the car, wait for my car service, and I'll just plop it up on a table with a pair of headphones and I'll just watch a video. I'll watch a video podcast. And it's fantastic. It's its own stand. It's great. I mean, it has so many uses. It's just a shame that Microsoft, again, like you said, Steve, it's just kind of infuriating. And I will tell you that I may not get into anything else Microsoft does in the future of a mobile space. I think this after the Windows Phone issue and then this Duo thing, I'm kind of like three times is kind of a little bit too much for me. I think I've been burnt. Entertain anything they do in the future. Yeah, I think so. And I hate to say that because I'm really a fan of Microsoft, as people know. And I'm to the point where I don't have any confidence in their ability to stick to it anymore.
Just going back to your question again about why Apple wouldn't do a folding device, and I mentioned multiple screens, but that's an important point because if you go back 5, 6, 7 years, the idea of having a device which could transform and do multiple functions, because the connectivity wasn't quite as good, say 10 years ago, you would have to manually set up synchronizations to get things working together and uploads and downloads. These days, it's quite practical to have a phone and a tablet and a laptop and a desktop somewhere, and you don't even have to manually sync anything. You can literally start a tweet or an email on one device, pick up the next, it's there in draft form. I'll carry on later, and you finish it off on the laptop or something. And so because everything is so continuous and synchronized and manually carried over automatically through the wonders of the internet, you don't have to have one device that you think, okay, this has to do everything because it's a real pain to get my information somewhere else. Now you can use all of these devices and screens in perfect sync, naturally and intuitively. And that's, I think, again, why I think we don't need an do-it-all, unfolding, transforming, compromised device, certainly from
things like AirDrop and Nearby Share as well, added to the mix, Dex as well. Yeah. Just put your small screen onto a bigger screen.
It was ridiculous back in the day when the Cyan Palm Tops, I mean, this is going back, I know, 28 years or so, but to send an email, I'd have to take my Cyan Palm Top to the local photocopier shop and find they had a phone socket, a DEC socket you could plug your little phone jack into. The phone jack went to a little 1200 or 2400 baud bits per second modem. The modem went into an RS-232 connector, which went to an adapter or a dongle, which went to the Scion 3 link, which was their serial adapter interface for the Palm Top. So you had a string of 3 or 4 sections of wire and adapters, then went into your Palm Top, and then you could send an email and receive an emails in what's called a blink, a short connection. You send, upload stuff, download stuff, and then you quickly disconnect before it costs you a fortune on the phone.
Right.
Somebody else's borrowed phone socket. And then you walk away back to your hotel on holiday, and then you can just read what people have sent you, compose some replies, and then you trot off back to the photocopier shop or wherever you have access to a phone socket. You plug in with your massive wires, you do it all over again. And these days, you don't think about it. Every screen you pick up, every screen has access to all of your stuff and all of your contacts and all of your emails and all of your socials, and the entirety of the internet of information. It's just there on every screen, and it's a very, very different world.
Yeah, and it is definitely. I can tell you right now, it's a fun world. On top of it, and as we were, and I, tell people when you talk to younger people about, when you had your first phone, you had nights and weekends, right? You had to make calls after 7, and those kind of things. You had to pay for text messages, and you had a pager, and you actually went to a payphone, and you walked into a booth, and you made your call, and it took change. Actually, I had to put coins in the machine, and they're just like, and TV shows went off the air at night. They weren't on, they went at midnight in the United States. They just went off. It's like, hey, we're signing off. They played the national anthem, and they didn't come on until 6 o'clock the next morning. They were just off. And you can tell the younger generation, they're just like, how did you guys even survive? It's like, yeah, it's Davy Crockett. We had fur hats and muskets. It was great back then, back in the mid 80s, when
thing is, with the world changing this way, criminals have changed as well. So like cybercrime and hackers and stuff like that is very prominent.
It was very noticeable in the early days of Wi-Fi. Before I had broadband, I guess about in the year 2000, some people in our neighborhood had the very first broadband. It was probably 100th the speed of today, but it was better than dial-up, which is all that those dial-up modems. But some we had broadband, and then you had Wi-Fi. But that cybercrime didn't exist then. People didn't hack into your system, so you could literally drive up and down the road. It's called war driving at the time, and you could find people who had Wi-Fi, and you just literally connect your device to theirs, and you could use their internet. And that was how a lot of us existed for several years. And then somebody somewhere must have done something naughty, and all of a sudden people started actually putting shock horror passwords on their Wi-Fi, and that was a real roadblock. But then, of course, I got broadband about 2002 or so, 2003, and then, of course, the world changed. I still remember Scion with their Palm Tops, their Windows software client. To download it was just 23 megabytes, I think it was, and it took me, on my dial-up, it would have taken me 4 hours.
Wow.
4 hours to download 23 megabytes. But on my neighbour's broadband, it only took an hour and a half. So these days, you could download 2.3 gigabytes in a matter of seconds. It's the increase in speeds is unreal. And for you and I, Sam, I don't know how old you are, Joe, but for you and I, Sam, to remember those days when things came down the screen, characters, not graphics, characters would flow down the screen as the modem received them, and logging into bulletin boards. So you'd literally see the graphics we made up of character blocks to simulate graphics, and you would watch the page loading in front of your eyes. And
it had to render as the data came in. It was just kind of like, and you go get a sandwich, use the restroom, come back, and it would be halfway down, and then it would disconnect. Or somebody at my house, it was tied into our regular phone line. So if somebody called our phone, it would disconnect your data. So my mom would get a phone call from a friend of hers and be like, Mom, she's like, it's like, I was trying to download this page and it stopped. And she's like, well, and you had to wait till she hung up the call, and then the line would re-engage. And then if you were lucky, you could pick it up where it left off. But a lot of times, if you'd refresh, it would start the transmission and it'd start all over to render.
Fresh,
it would take, some of these pages took literally 5 minutes to render just the UI. And then you could click on your thing, and then it was that call would go to the server, and you have to wait another couple of minutes for that page to load. It was pretty wild. It was
the modern generation. They'd probably guess that, say, the internet was, I'd say, the internet was slower in my day, dear, and they'd say to my daughter or whoever, and they'd say, well, 10 times slower, 20 times, no, 100,000 times slower. That's how slow. It's so slow that it was a completely different form. It was a completely different system, a completely different way of interacting with the world at 100,000 times slower than the current speed.
But it was still satisfying, right?
Well, it was amazing. The fact that you could, even just like in the video game market, when I got my first Nintendo, I was in 1985, and the fact that Super Mario Brothers on my TV at home looked just like the Super Mario Brothers at the arcade where my mom we used to go to a laundromat because I didn't have a game. Well, I had an Atari, but I mean, it was clearly obvious that they didn't have, you go to an arcade, right? It didn't look like that. But for the first time at home, I was 10 years old, and I had an exact copy of Super Mario, and I could play it as much as I wanted. Didn't cost any quarters or nothing. And it looked exactly the same. If I went to the laundromat and put my 25 cents in, it would look exactly the same. Had the controller, and everything. And it was like, when you're a kid, That's amazing. Like we thought it was the coolest. Like when I was a kid, I mean, you were the hot guy on the block. If you had the Nintendo, kids would come to your house and like just want to play it because they didn't have to go sit at the arcade and put quarters across the cabinet, right, and wait their turn at their coffee shop or ice cream shop or the laundromat and and play games. So that's kind of how I recognize it. It was incredible. Like to have a computer in your house when I was a kid. It was like color TV. I mean, a lot of people had black and white, and then you had the one guy in your neighborhood who got a color TV. It was like, holy cow, a color television, right? And you're like, yeah. So interesting. But I would argue that it's exponential. Growth is never linear, right? Especially in the tech space, it's exponential. Now, wait, what are we going to see? We're already at what Cat 6, for speeds, right? We're getting to gigabit, 2 and 3 and 4 gigabit a second speeds. It's pretty incredible what some of these places are achieving now.
I'm not sure we're exponential anymore on many of those areas because we at some point you do start to hit the laws of physics. I mean, back in the sort of 90s to the noughties, everything was, I agree, everything was growing and faster and better and cleverer. But at some point you start to hit atoms, you start to hit the wavelengths of light, you start to hit literally the speed of light. At some point you do hit the laws of physics, as you would say in Star Trek. And at that point, things don't become not exponential, they are linear. You're just making gradual improvements and things become parallel rather than serial. And you can do multiple things at once and you make things faster in that way. You can charge batteries faster by having 2 battery circuits and 2 batteries that are joined, all of that stuff. But those are kind of workarounds to the laws of physics, I think.
So I think phone cameras highlight that.
Absolutely.
What are you saying?
Yeah, I mean, just what you can achieve on that. Like I said, I mean, now that you have the experience, the capability of that device. I mean, can you imagine having that back when we had, and the 1020 back in the day was amazing, right? You had 43 megapixels. You could feel that it had a xenon. It was great. That was my first Windows phone, and that was what made me fall in love with it. On top of the UI and just everything else, but it still holds up. And I did want to appreciate that even you kept going like, hey, here's the phone. Here's an S20. Here's a Lumia 950. Let's put them side by side. Yeah, and it's fantastic that you're one of the only people that had ever seen that continue to say, no, I want to show you. And my question is, what was that? Is that something just different? Or was like you were the only person doing comparisons to like the 1020 was like an homage to the 1020? Or is it just because it's like nobody else is doing it? And I think it's good to see the differences and what's similar and what's different.
Yeah, I think Nokia's imaging engineers did it right. They did the oversampling properly, a proper RGB oversampling to produce. I know it's a buzzword. They called it pure view, and the idea was that the pixels that resulted, the 43 down to 5 megapixels in the 1020's case, or down to 8 in the Lumia 950's case. Those resulting pixels would be purer because all the noise had been averaged out across the oversampling. The modern era tends to not only do quad Bayer, which is taking 4:1 and doing it very dumbly, very unintelligently. There's also a preference, I think, for everything being sharp and saturated and over processed and edge enhanced, and I can't stand that. And what I wanted to show to people for years on All About Windows Phone and All About Mobile was that these old Nokia's 1020, 950, the shots they take, if you actually look closely at 1:1, if you crop into them, for example, you can see that the pixels are beautifully pure and there are no jaggies, there are no edges which don't exist in real life. If you go into a typical Samsung photo S20 era and you crop into it, every line is jaggy and blocky and ugly, and it's only looking at the photo on the phone screen that looks okay. The moment you blow it up, a big monitor, you see this is ghastly. This is nowhere near DSLR quality, or something of like from the PureView range from Nokia at the time. You could blow it up to poster side, and it would look natural, and there would be nothing ugly and nothing artificial about it. And I wanted to highlight that. When All About Windows Phone and kind of died a death, and that all wound down, I didn't need to keep referring back to these old Lumias, but I'm still bringing them out and I still keep them charged and working because I still use them as my reference, really. The iPhones with its Pro RAW system, where they do all of the clever iPhone multi-frame processing like Google does. But in the Pro RAW thing, they miss out the last edge enhancement and sharpening steps. So the iPhone's Pro RAW, wave my iPhone around again, Pro RAW, they're very similar and have the same sort of ethos to those PureView images from the Nokias. And it's no coincidence that Ari Partanen, one of the PureView architects on Nokia, went to work for for Apple. He was their imaging architect for years while all of this was being developed. So I consider the in terms of imaging, I consider the iPhone Pro series as being the natural follow-on or descendants from the Nokia PureViews. In terms of the successor to the Symbian Nokia N series, I think the Sony, I think Joe would agree there. It's got all the bells and whistles, including the headphone jack, etc. It's got everything one might need. And this is a modern Nokia N series, I think, would be envisaged something like this Sony.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that as far as the spirit, because I was going to ask you what you felt was the spiritual or kind of like the successor to the PureView cameras, and I do like iPhone. And everybody, just because we don't talk about it, I mean, I don't own one, and I honestly, I thought about it. Maybe I need to try to have one and try it, because make my wife happy. She's all about iPhone, and so is the entire family. I'm kind of the lone holdout. Although my daughter, Kaylin, she went and she has my old Pixel, so she's kind of went to the Android space, and that much to the dismay of my wife. Actually, she was very upset about it. I mean, legitimately upset that Kaylin and I are now using an Android device. But so I guess the only thing else I could say is what's the future? I know you're into other shows, other podcasts, I know. And so what's the future for you? I know you're kind of like, in the semi-retired state. Is there a full retirement state, or do you kind of like where you are right now, and you're just going to let it ride and kind of see where it goes? What's the plans for your growth and your channel and your professional development going forward the next couple of years?
I don't think geeks and tech nerds ever retire, really, because we want to stay abreast of what's happening, as you know, and we want, even though new phones come out every day, new technologies, new standards, we try and stay abreast of it. We try and understand it the best we can. So I'm never going to fully retire. I'll always be fiddling with technology here. I'll always be helping family, helping friends, helping customers. I'm probably producing videos, and I've got my writing now. No, I'm not being paid to write for the All About sites. I just write on a blog, which is linked from stevelitchfield.com, and the advantage of not being paid by anyone is I can write on whatever the heck I want. So you get one week you get a phone imaging comparison article, the next week you get the top 50 Hawkwind tracks or whatever, and everything in between. And I just enjoy writing about anything I want to write about.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's kind of what we do on our show. Like I said, we just kind of let it go and talk about whatever.
Whatever the hell we want.
Yeah, whatever, and it's all good. And like I said, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. And like I said, I've been a fan of your content for years, and I do like the shorts. I think that really you have something good going there. So my feedback was, please keep it up, because I kind of look forward to them, because it gives me just a kind of real, like, it's really nice. It's like 58 seconds. I get to see your content. You get to talk about the devices, whatever you're talking about, or if it's just a thought about foldables or the Duo, or just anything you want to talk about. I'm a fan of that content, and I think
I'd also like to mention the MeWe as well. The community you've built with Ted there is fantastic. Like, anyone who checks out the podcast, also check out the MeWe. Join the chat there. It's brilliant.
Yeah, MeWe's a social network. Is it UK based? I honestly don't know. It might be European.
I don't know. We need Ted for that.
Given the mess Twitter's become, and the steaming pile of whatever that Facebook has been since the beginning, and every social network seems to have its major problems. MeWe kind of came out of nowhere with the posts aren't public. You can't link to an MeWe post. You have to be part of a community. Back in the day in the UK, whether you remember, Joe, before, when we had CompuServe forums and CIX, CompuLink Information Exchange, they were kind of bulletin boards on steroids. You'd log in and you join communities of people, and there'll be community for every subject, a bit like Reddit is today, I guess, although Reddit's got its own problems, I believe, in 2023. So MeWe's kind of come as a social network that's very private, very community based, and you can keep control of who comes in and who comes out. People have to apply to belong to a community. So you wouldn't believe how many spammers and try to join our PSC forums.
I can imagine, yeah.
You just give them some basic questions, what does PSC stand for? And they put, don't know. And you think, okay, well, you're right. I said, there are people who join there and be a part of that community, when people we know listen to the show, therefore we know that they're in the right sort of ballpark. And the community we have, as you know, the discussions and even a classifieds area where we can share phones around, buy, beg, sell, and so forth. It's a wonderful place to be. I mean, I still only spend half an hour a day on it because I've got so many other things going on in my life, but it's so much more productive and more enjoyable than hanging around trying to make sense of something on Facebook or Reddit or even Twitter, I think. So yeah, MeWe, big shout out, and do link to it. if you can.
Definitely.
Absolutely. We will do that as well. We'll make sure we also have not only the phone show chat for those, but also the Steve Litchfield, your website as well, to try to drive some traffic to you. Now, unfortunately, I know it's going to come to as a major surprise to you, but we don't have as much reach as Joe Rogan. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to drive a ton of traffic to you, but again, it's we have a different approach to it. And like I said, I just want to thank you for taking time, because I know that this is something that we enjoy doing and having on, and I've been really looking forward to actually speaking with you in person. I know you've had a lot of guests on that, like you've had. I know you had me. I'm actually a fan of Miriam Jouar. I think she's one of the most fascinating people in the tech space. And but having your people on and then actually having you on our show. And you agreeing to come on, it's been a treat, and I really, really want to extend my thanks. And
we banned the word legend out too much, but Steve, you really are a legend, and it's an honor having you on here.
Especially because of it's just your experience and longevity and how you've been able to. I mean, it's different when you talk to somebody who's in their mid-20s. I mean, they just don't have they can't really understand where we came from, right? They live in the space of now. And like I said, we grew up where the Cold War was a thing, right? That was a thing, right? And so, there were two parts of there was an East and West Germany, right? It was just crazy, right? And how your experience over all these years and your background in programming stuff, how you can leverage that into today and still be relevant and do it. We just think it's fantastic. And we're really a fan of your show.
Well, thank you. Miriam and I are certainly of similar generation, and we both refer to each other as OG, or she uses OG, original
right.
Because we were there at the start of technology, as indeed you possibly were. It's quite sobering from MKBHD. I love Marques Brownlee's videos, but when he started, was it 2011? And as a like 12-year-old or 13-year-old, right
in his room, just kind of like talking to his he might have been like 8th or 9th grade at the time when he first started.
Yeah. So when he was doing that, I'd already been reviewing phones on YouTube for 7 years, 7 years, and I've been reviewing tech for 25 years. So it's
right.
I'll take the legend tag, if only because of my longevity and the fact that I started so early. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what the L means. Steve L. That's what the L means. Legend.
Steve Legend, absolutely. And so again, we appreciate it. And like I said, any other time in the future, please, you always have an open invitation to swing on by. And again, maybe we can talk whatever tech is of the day. But again, we really appreciate you taking your time. I know that you're quite busy with your endeavors, and it's been a privilege and an honor, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right, Joe, any final thoughts or last words before we end for the day?
Well, Steve, would you come on again sometime?
Next year.
Next year. Fantastic. Yeah, let's do it.
Well, we'll have a new season, right? We kind of do seasons like Diablo. We just kind of decide just to drop a season kind of in the middle of nowhere, right? So
I'll come on next summer. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
Sounds great.
Well, Steve, again, we appreciate your time, and thanks for coming in. And for everybody who stopped by in the chat, please make sure you download, take a listen, tell your friends about it. It's a pretty cool show. Get pretty nice people on. And again, present company obviously included in that. And so we'll be back next Sunday. We don't have a guest lined up, but hey, you know what? We'll just still show up anyway. And Joe can talk about his new stuff. He's got some new tech we want to talk about.
Yes, I've got a lot of new stuff. Yeah.
And we'll bring that up then. So for myself, for Joe, for Steve Litchfield, thanks for joining us today. Again, take care of yourselves. Enjoy your tech. Be good and be excellent to each other. We'll see you next Sunday on the Nomad Tech Project with Sam and Joe. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.